Hi, Turdville. Mr. Fix here. Before the weekend sets in, I just wanted to do another update. Quickly, I wanted to brush on the message sent to Germany and Europe via the plane crash. That was we're obviously not being told the whole story there. The facts don't add up. We've all read by now at least multiple theories and websites. I like Joseph Farrell's version of things. Um, Ancient Money put up a good post pertaining to all the things that don't add up, don't make sense. And whether you buy that the audio tape released, you know, I mean, obviously they didn't release an audio tape. They just got some people saying what it said. And that's going to be the official version, and they're sticking to it. We'll never actually hear that tape. Unless they create one, I mean, God, nowadays with, high tech gizmos, you can pretty much make anyone say anything. Not a problem. I would imagine the CIA does it all the time. But more importantly, I'm not buying it. There's just too many things about what's going on in geopolitical terms with Europe, France, Germany wanting to side with Russia in Ukraine, wanting to side with China on the new banking system, and obviously some people with no moral backbone whatsoever would make sure they get the message, and I don't think it's going to work. Um, I've been listening, of course, to Jim Willie, who's got some really interesting insights on this, and he thinks that World War III is not going to happen. Um, I know that next week or next weekend, Turt's going to do another A to A with Jim Willie, and he's inviting questions. I'm going to put together some questions. I want explanations like, you know, is the rift between Obama and Putin genuine? I want to figure out if he can explain all the different factions and players involved in this. What about the Netanyahu, versus Obama thing? I mean, if they're all working for the Western banking cartel, then we've got some issues here. They're either just play acting and we're in for a really big surprise, or there's some major schisms in their whole, one world order plan. Um, I wanted to address the free energy thing. It was said that one of the posts stating that if I actually invented this, I would be the wealthiest man in the world. Well, that's not my intent, and it's not possible under the current system. These are some of the most closely guarded secrets there are. I've had experience with this in the past where, not with the approach that I'm doing now, but I used to do the gas vaporization, vaporize the gas to build a carburetor that would feed dry vapors into an engine and run, and it works. There were plenty of plans available in the early 80s on how to accomplish this. I purchased some. And although they promised that you could get 200 miles to the gallon out of a full-size car, I got 75 miles to the gallon, and that's not too bad for a car that normally got about 8 or 9 miles to the gallon. So, I did have some success, and it was reliable. Unfortunately, I left the car unattended for about 10 minutes and it burned to the ground. I mean, and it had been working perfect. I don't know exactly what caused that fire. I literally turned my back and it was fully engulfed. Um, and, I can only surmise that maybe somebody didn't want that. I was very ignorant of the world that we lived in then. I was about 19, 20 years old at the time, and I was advertising it. I was, flaunting it. I was saying, look what I can do. And, as, your shill detector would say, I was being a little narcissistic, and it bit me in the butt. What can I tell you? So I try not to play those games anymore. What I'm working on here, I'm not posting on the free energy section of YouTube either. That's, that would be an easy way to get a million hits. And You know, I don't want to do that, and I don't want to invite the attention that it brings. What I'm trying to figure out is something a little bit um, more useful than what I've got. Okay, I wanted to show you a little bit of that. Again, the original prototype. The one that I'm working on now, I can tell you I've already bought new brushes for my drill. It was getting very quirky. I'm putting an external variable speed on it and setting up a rig. When I had made this gizmo right here, which you'll recognize from a previous video, um, I made a rig and stuff to do these windings and stuff. And I know there's only 4 of them on here that are fairly large. This was all I needed for a proof of concept. On the other one I'm working on, that design actually has 16 different magnets, and all of them are going to require an inner and an outer coil. So there's a tremendous amount of winding involved, and I'm setting up the rigging now where I can I'm not just going to sit there with a bolt and just keep wrapping the wire around. That you know I'm going to try and electrify that and save at least a little time. It's still days and days and days of work, but it's I'm trying to set up the rigs so that can be done in a reasonably efficient manner, and qualities specific. It took me a while to figure out how to get the exact same ohms on all 16 of them, or the exact same amount of windings. I don't have a counter. I'm going to basically do it with an ohm meter, and you know these wires are coated with shellac, and if you just take off a little bit of it, you can test it and put the shellac back on and try and dial it in. So I'm going to have to come up with an amount of ohms that I will find on my meter, and then try and duplicate 16 of them that are basically the same, and then do the same thing on the outer coil. So and a lot of this I'm guessing, so that's why I wanted to try and get the theory down real good. I wanted to show you a little bit on this because some people had wondered how this was working as far as how why the electronics would work better. And I agree, some people have tried that, but they do use electricity, and there isn't much to spare here. Now we've got on this particular gizmo here, which I'm gonna see if I can set up pretty good. All right, I'm gonna slide into the picture and see what we got here. What I've got is on this side, we've got the coils, or timer, and everything's backwards on this picture, so bear with me for a second. This part that I made right here, it's basically similar to an armature, okay? And what I'm looking at right here is, let's say, the power into it, okay? It's on one bearing. And these are cut like V's. If you look right here, you can see that it just comes to a point, okay? And then if you can see at the top, all right, they all come to little points, all right? Now, setting these up takes a long time, all right? Like I said, this was originally an Adams motor design, and if you Google that, you'll find out how this differs in many ways from his, but the principles are all the same. What I can do on here is adjust the timing by backing off on these nuts, all right? And then turn this copper armature, a little bit each way. And the idea is that you want to break the magnetic field exactly as the magnet is pulling away from the windings, okay? So you get sucked into it, and try and do it on this side. On one side, the generator coils have a much bigger bolt, but the drive coils have only a 1/4 inch screw in the middle of them, all right? And you're not going to be able to see that, but trust me, there's a 1/4 inch screw. So now, one of the principles, there were different ideas on why this works, all right? And one was that it takes less electricity to break the field than the magnet actually creates, okay? Now, the whole idea here is that you're not actually using the electricity to drive it. The magnets are doing that. All you're using the electricity for is to break that field. Okay, so it does. See how it's got that cogging effect? All right, where it just bounces right and back. It gets drawn right to that. So if you give it a pulse at just the right time, just as it's trying to pull away from there, it'll break that field, and it's just a little momentary zap, and then the next magnet gets drawn back in, okay, with no electricity at all. Now, they had said that it takes less electricity to break that field than the magnet creates. Okay, now that's one plausible theory. I'm not sure about that. Okay, I'm not sure about any of these things, but it's for the brain trust here to try and analyze. The other thing is the dwell. All right. When I said setting this up, you've got the timing, so you want the little pulse to be at exactly the right moment to break that field. But also, because this has the points on it, all right, there are actually bolts right here, and I can back them off, and I can move this part in or out, okay? It's, of course, spring-loaded. You can see the nice springy there. And all right. I can move this out towards the tip, and that'll give it a very short pulse, or I can move it in, give it a long pulse, okay? Now, we're not going for fast. What we're going for is most efficient. So we're trying to basically keep that motor spinning with as little electricity as possible. So you basically want the shortest pulse possible with the timing perfect, okay? So I've got it basically set up now where that pulse is, I can actually speed it up rather drastically just by giving it a longer pulse. You might hear it, or I can slow it down quite a bit by shortening the pulse. And if I shorten it too much, it doesn't run, obviously. All right. So this is the whole idea on that you would replace with electronics, a way to time the pulse, and that can be done with sensors on the wheel. But then the electronics has to have some kind of variable that so you can adjust the duration of the pulse. All right. I opted to do that all mechanically because it's just a proof of concept, and I am just much better at looking at something and figuring out how it works than trying to play with gauges and digital displays on a meter and things like that. Not to mention, I'm not an electrical engineer. I have no training in that area at all. So sometimes figuring out how to do these things, I must have to go to school for that. The same thing happened on this end, where I've got my charging circuits. All right. Now the idea here is that you are charging up capacitors with the back pulse. All right, using diodes, it turns the alternating current into direct current, and then it charges up a diode. Now, one of the theories being is that you actually get a pickup of electricity every time you pulse the battery. It says this only works with dry acids. I can't get this to keep running on just a pure capacitor. Capacitors do charge and discharge instantly, but if you study the work from Bendini, he's got motors that charge their own batteries, and he'll switch the batteries back and forth. You can have one battery drive the motor, and the pulsing circuit, he dumps that into another battery, all right? And that all works. This, I kind of cleverly figured out how to make it do both at the same time. This does keep its own battery charged, all right? And, it's kind of noisy. Now, the other principle, like I was saying with this, is you would also need a timing circuit that's so you're charging it up to twice the voltage. So if this is running on 12 volts, every time the capacitors get charged up to 24 volts, okay, then you short it back to the battery when these contacts hit. And that charges the battery. It puts a bolt of 24 volts into the battery. And the theory with Bendini is you just keep zapping the battery like that. It keeps it charged, or charges it more efficiently than if you just put like the long, slow, trickle charger type effect. He seems to think that zapping it works better. Um, that's his theory. Okay, so we'll see what happens with that. So anyway, those are some of the things that I had figured out. All right, and we're up over 15 minutes. I hope this actually still works. Take it easy.